Hey guys, Constance here from Cosmopolitan Cornbread. So I am working on some canning today. Well, I'll be canning today and tomorrow. I am canning chicken. So I went through my freezer, pulled out a bunch of whole chickens that I had in there, and I will be working on those. Here I've got a bunch of bone-in thighs. I've also got bone-in breasts, split breasts, and I'm canning all of these bone-in, the thighs and the breasts. Now I'm removing the skin, and I'm removing any excess fat that I can get off of these. Just remove that. Fat doesn't can up very well, so you kind of want to get rid of that, but I'm not discarding it. I'm going to save all that because tonight I'm going to be roasting several whole chickens, and I'm going to save the carcasses, and tomorrow I'm going to be making chicken stock. And when I make the chicken stock, I'll just go ahead and add all of these skins and fat to the big old pot, and that's just going to add more flavor to the chicken stock. So I'm using wide-mouthed quart jars, and I'm going to just pack the chicken in there, and then I'm not going to add any sort of seasoning because I just want to preserve the chicken. And what I'll do is I'll fill this up with water and leave about 1.25 inches of head space, and that is the space from the top of the jar down to the top of the contents that you are canning. Now, there's different philosophies on canning meat like this as to whether you put water in there or not, but I like to do the water in there because, yes, while the meat may create its own liquid, there's no guarantee there's going to be enough to actually cover the meat. And any meat that is in there that is exposed to the air, it's going to dry out, it's going to discolor, and it's not going to look very good. It'll still be good to eat, but it's not going to look very good. So I like to just go ahead, put the liquid in there, and then when I use this chicken, like say I want to make chicken soup or something from this meat, I can use that liquid. I can add that liquid to the soup and simply use it as broth for the recipe that I'm making. And so by adding the water in there, it gives me the choice as to whether I want to use that or not. So now that big garden season is over, I mean, we do still have some things out there. I went out last night and picked 2 great big baskets of peppers because the weather's getting colder. And we did have a very light frost yesterday morning, but the pepper plants are holding on so far. They didn't shrivel up or anything like that. Peppers generally do not like cold. And when the weather gets colder, if the pepper plant is still alive, it'll still produce, but those peppers are going to get smaller and smaller and smaller. So I'm picking all the peppers that I can while I can, and I got this handy dandy attachment. I'm so excited about it. It's basically a food processor attachment that goes on your KitchenAid mixer, and it dices the peppers for you. You want to talk about a time saver? I mean, I've got 2 great big baskets of peppers over there. That will be fantastic. So I am excited because I will be using that for the first time. So as I was saying, now that big garden season is over, now I can spend some time preserving and canning other things that aren't in the garden. Stuff like tons of meat that I have in the freezer, or canning up soups and things like that. So the food preservation is continuing. It's just changing direction a little bit. Alright, so now I'm finishing up my jars here, and I'm making sure that I'm really cleaning off the rims of these jars, because chicken is greasy, it's meat, and so I want to make sure that these are good and clean. So I'm wiping them down with a damp rag, and then I'm wiping them really well with vinegar. And what that does is it helps cut through any residue, any oil or grease that might be on there, and get it nice and clean. And I want to make sure I can tell what's what as far as the contents of these jars go. So I'm just taking a cloth here and drying off the lids, and then I'm going ahead and I'm labeling the jars before they go into the canner. Now I'm doing breasts and I'm doing thighs, and so I'm just marking it with a B if it's breast meat and a T if it's thigh meat. And then I actually had a couple of jars that held a breast and a thigh, and so those say B plus T. And then I had one lone thigh left that would not fit in any of the other jars, and so I'm just putting this one in a pint all by itself. The pints and quarts process at the same time, so that'll work out just fine. Okay. I'm making sure the lid is level before I start cranking it down, because this is the All-American canner. It's a little bit different than my Presto canner. It has these giant wing nuts that clamp the lid down, so you want to make sure it's level before you even get started. And it just makes things much easier. Pretty good. So I'm going to grab the opposite sides, raise up the wing nut, just barely close that, barely turn it, just enough so that it stays in place. Alright, and then I'll do the opposite, give it a turn, give it a turn, give it a turn, make sure we're still level. Looks good. And they're nice and firm. And now we're going to turn on the stove and get this thing going. Okay, so I've got a steady stream of steam coming out of the vent right there. Got about 5 more minutes. It's very important to vent your pressure canner before you put the weight on, because what is happening inside is all of the air is being pushed out of the canner, and it's creating this atmosphere in there that is conducive for building pressure. And so you've got to vent it in order to make sure you're actually getting the appropriate pressure and temperature inside your pressure canner. Very important tip. You don't want to rush this. Make sure you let it just blow all that steam off for about 10 good minutes before you add your weight. Alrighty, so my chicken actually just finished processing in the pressure canner. So now I'm just going to let the pressure come down. That's going to take a good bit of time because this is the All-American canner. It's a very heavy-duty thing, so it holds heat a bit longer. And I double-stacked quarts in there, so that's a lot of volume, and it's going to take some time for that pressure to come down. So once it gets all the way down to 0, you wait just a little bit longer, then you take off the weight and all that stuff. Okay, so the canned chicken is all out. It looks like all of the lids have sucked down and clicked into place. So right now we will just leave them be. We'll just let them sit until tomorrow. Then I will remove the rings, test the seals, wash the jars, and label them. But that right there is a whole bunch of chicken. And it's all cooked and ready to be used for all sorts of recipes down the road. So that is one more thing checked off the box, and tomorrow I will be working on more chicken stuff. So I am actually working on trying to can as much of the meat that is in my freezer as possible. I don't like having hundreds of dollars of meat that is dependent upon electricity to keep it preserved. Because if we had a big storm come through here or any sort of emergency that knocked the power out, there's all that food in there that would be lost. And considering we are already into the Greek alphabet with the hurricanes this year, and hurricane season isn't over yet, I mean, we could get more, who knows. It just really makes a point as to why I don't like my food preservation, my food supply in my home dependent upon electricity. And so that is why I've begun working on canning meats and all of that. It just makes me feel a little bit better knowing that if the power goes out for some reason, we've still got food that is safe and available to be eaten. So that is it for today. If you have any questions about the recipe or how I canned the chicken, please leave them in the comments down below and I will be sure to answer them. So thanks for joining me here again in the Homestead Kitchen. My name is Constance from Cosmopolitan Cornbread, and I'll talk to y'all next time.